welcome to episode 15 of Leadership Conversations with Krishna. And I'm pleased to have my guest, Mr. Pranav Doshi. I'll just take a moment to introduce him. Pranav is based in Dubai, UAE. He's an entrepreneur, consultant, primarily works in the aerospace defense industry, but also is into trade and investments. He works very closely in the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, the GCC countries, and also India. Welcome, Pranav.
Thank you, Krishna. Thank you so much for having me over today. Um, uh, yes, as you rightly said, I work quite a lot between GCC and India, two of the largest growing economies in the world currently, the most happening economies. And I mean, the UAE and India literally love stories, and I'm happy to be here at the opportune moment. In fact, when I tell people jokingly that Dubai is India's finest city, so that is how I describe my life in Dubai.
Yeah, no, rightly so. And I while UAE kind of takes the limelight, and rightly so, including Dubai and Abu Dhabi, but there is an underrated country that India has a very strong relationship with, Oman. And I know that you recently went there to travel, and even Prime Minister Modi was there. He received.
At the same time as I was there.
Oh, okay. And I know he received an award, and then there was also a trade deal between the two countries. How do you see this relationship, right? If you could talk a little bit about it.
Sure. So see, GCC as such, I mean, India's relationships are largely, I mean, there are 6 countries in the GCC, and plus I would include Yemen when we talk of business and trade, in fact, in the past. So these 7 countries have largely been India's trade partners for a very long time, especially even we know that even during Roman times, a lot of trade between India and the Roman Empire used to pass through what is today Saudi Arabia and Yemen, especially the port of Aden at that time, and to a certain extent the neighboring regions. But in today's context, I think the 2 countries with which India has the most, or rather the most dense relationships, would be the UAE and Oman. Saudi, of course, has a large expat worker population, but if we talk just as purely from business and the kind of business environments that have been created between the 2 countries, we notably talk about Oman and UAE. Now, before UAE came into being what it is today, in fact, Oman was the one big stop for most Indian merchants, for most Indian trade in the GCC. Um, I mean, if you go back, if you want to go back into the history of relationships with Oman, business relationships, we're talking about merchants from Sindh and Gujarat who have been living in Muscat, in Oman, especially in the port cities of especially Sohar and Sur. They've been living there since about the 1500s. I mean, Oman, Gujarati and Sindhi merchants financed a lot of were financiers. They were traders and had an excellent reputation in Oman. To that extent, in fact, I was just reading up a book recently where they had so much power that in 1791 they actually convinced the then Sultan of Oman to move his capital from Muscat to Zanzibar. Because if you know, Oman was a much bigger country in a couple of centuries ago, where it extended right. It took over most of the UAE, Oman, as well as the eastern coast of Africa. So Oman has a very special place, in fact, for I think for India. We've had they say that this Oman was the first stop in the whirlwind trip that Gujaratis took to all over the world. This was the first stop before they started going expanding out into the world. Um, in recent times, we had even Sultan Qaboos, who reigned for 49 years, who was India's best ally, who stood by India during the 1971 war with Pakistan, where ironically India being isolated by most Muslim countries, but Oman was the one that stood very steadfastly with India. Now, in terms of there are, in fact, there are several large groups now today who play a very active role in Oman. You have the, especially if you hear of the Ramdas Khimji family, who have been around since, at least I think, if I'm not mistaken, for more than 200 years, and who have now been given as Omani citizenship. Who have been one of them is literally a sheikh in the Omani parliament. So sheikh, as you would know, is loosely used in South Asia for names, but sheikh actually by itself is a title, in fact. And you have in a very nice way, funny but in a nice way, the only vegetarian non-Arab sheikh in the Arab world who's a Gujarati, in fact. Gujarati descent, of course. They're now naturalized Omani, in fact. And so given the reputation, given the long tenure that Indian merchants and the influence that they've had in Oman, so I think what India signed last month is actually just a culmination of and a recognition of that partnership. So with this India Oman SIPA, you literally have a zero tariffs on 98% of the goods that India and Oman trade between each other. Till recently, there was a cap on hiring Indian workers in Oman, which was about 20%. Uh, because of course Oman has a large local population compared to the UAE, which has a small local population. Oman has a very large Omani population, and the Omanization program is very strong. But they still, again, given our lobbying power, um, they've increased that hiring cap on from 20% to 50%. So large Omani companies can now hire Indian workers to 50% of their workforce capacity. So which is quite a jump from 20 to 30. So I think 20 to 50. I'm sorry. So I think it's a natural progression. India and Oman are, I think, just across the sea. I mean, I would literally call Oman a sea neighbor, in fact, not a neighbor with whom we share a land border, but still a neighbor nonetheless, with whom I just at the start of this week we saw the INS Kaudinya, in fact, that was sent across to Oman, commemorating the trade that used to be carried out between the two countries, even in older times. So I think Oman and India are extremely natural partners. I'm happy to see that they've honored the Indian Prime Minister. I'm happy to see that the warmth between the two countries, and I think even in terms of tourism, I think it's underrated, as you rightly mentioned. But I think there's a deliberate reason why they've kept it that Oman does not want to be a Dubai. And I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean it in a good way. Omanis, if you go to Oman, the pace of life is slower. The Omanis, I mean, are I wouldn't say laid back, but they're still the people who take the time out, who are very cordial, very nice, and and you don't see the kind of people rushing everywhere like you'd see in Dubai. I mean, I was surprised, and even I was amused. But stores in Oman closed down in the afternoon from 3 to 5, even today.
That's
Like
fascinating.
even in the capital city in Muscat, even in the most poshest of areas, even they just close down. Because and I think that's one thing I appreciate. I mean, we've gone a bit too far in talking about life and fast paced life, but I think Oman takes it well enough. And I don't think they want mass tourism. Today we see Spain booing tourists and asking them to go back home. Most of the European capitals now are flooded with tourists. I don't think Oman wants to go that way. So my own personal trip, in fact, I mean, we'd gone through, it has a lot of nature. We'd walked through a lot of wadis, and you don't see much of a crowd. You do see a certain amount of crowd, but it's not what you'd see now in Dubai, for example. just
Mhm.
just uh, just yesterday you had the fireworks, and you had like millions of people flooding the downtown and the metro networks. I don't think Oman wants to go that way, and I think it's a deliberate choice they've made. And And though it stays under the radar, I think it needs more recognition. They've been trying to increase their tourism. They've been trying to promote their tourism. And I think Indians will probably fill in that gap in a very big way. I mean, we're not even far from Muscat, in fact. It's like a, sorry, 2.5 hour flight journey.
No, that's fascinating, right? And I think the one thing that I personally appreciate about the GCC countries is that they've, along with growth, also kind of managed, the culture, the home culture pretty well, right? And
Yes.
I think even Kuwait, for example, right, tries wants to kind of be more behind the scenes. It's not that they have any dearth of cash, right, if you would call it. Coming
Mm.
back to Oman, right? Now everybody thinks Muscat's the big city, right? From a business perspective, like what other like cities or ports do you think are kind of business centers, if you would call it, between India and Oman? Because uh, Muscat takes the limelight, but what other places do you think there are?
See, Oman is pretty centralized in that sense. So yes, Muscat will take the limelight, being the capital and being the largest city. But you have you in terms of business, especially when you talk about port and maritime trade. I think there are other like the port cities of Sohar and Duqm, which where in fact even India has invested in the port infrastructure. I think these are from a unique perspective of trade and international trade and in infrastructure. I think these are the other two port cities that can compete with Muscat in terms of business. Unlike a Dubai, Oman is not too high as yet on new world technology. They don't talk about AI, they don't talk about Bitcoin, they don't talk about any of that for now. But it's more on the traditional business. So, of course, a lot of agricultural products are shipped from India and the rest of the world. Shipping facilities and oil, of course, oil transition, refining is also something that Oman is strong at, given its available resources. And I think there is no specific competition that each city would be able to give. The port cities have their own requirement, and Muscat by itself, being the capital, being where the money is, being where the investors are, has a different role to play altogether. It finances most of the projects that goes on in the rest of the country, in fact.
That's great to know. Yeah, going back to Oman's neighboring country and your country of residence, and a country that like you said, India has a love story with, and a lot of Indians really appreciate and like the UAE. But the business relationship or the economic relationship has been growing, right? And so, like, but can you talk us through some facts or numbers as to how it has grown beyond 2022 when we signed the SEPA? And
Mhm.
also, are we at the peak of this relationship, or is this relationship like kind of unlimited growth, as they call it, right? The India-UAE relationship.
So see, before I go into what business we're doing today, I'd rather like to give you a bit of the history, because trade is not just today; it's been going on for a very very long time. So again, like Oman, the UAE has always been a transit country, where it is strategically between India, Europe, and then of course a part of the I mean, especially through Iran. I think even during the Roman times, I've been reading up. They used to actually to do trade with India. Sometimes they used to actually take the route of the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, come out from what is Basra today, and then sail to India. On trade between Europe and India, and I think it still continues to play that very strategic role. And but on the reverse, it has become India's gateway, as I would call it, India's gateway to the rest of the world. In fact, because I think a lot of Indian companies now in their their scope, or in their other in the search for internationalization, actually look towards Dubai, because it's such a big transit hub, in fact. Now, in terms of the CEPA that we've signed, in fact, I think the a brilliant job has been done by the Indian government, and especially the Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, who I think comes here so often, and he's been at the spearhead for the IIT Delhi campus, for the IIM Ahmedabad campus in Dubai that has been recently announced, and various other such educational as well as trade initiatives that have come into force since, like, I think 1st May 2022. So I think, see, it helps the UAE because we realized during COVID that the UAE, of course, is heavily dependent on food imports from most countries, because given its desert climate and the landscape, there isn't that much that grows. Of course, they've been making a lot of initiatives in vertical farming, where they grow now tomatoes, they grow rice, they grow a few other things, but it's still a country that is very heavily dependent on food imports from the rest of the world. And I think that's where India fits the bill very largely, because I think a very large proportion of what the UAE imports comes from India. Of course, it comes from other countries too. It comes from Sri Lanka, it comes from Pakistan, and various other and African countries. But I think India takes the cake, in fact, on this. But I think it's also because there is a very long history of trust between the two countries. Now, if you see, we if we have to talk about the relations in the modern day, what a lot of Indians don't know, and which is very little documented, in fact, in whether it is a history books or a national narrative, is that the Trucial states is what the UAE used to be called before, and Oman, as well as Aden, just the protectorate of Aden, were all governed from the Bombay Presidency by the British. So these were not direct colonies of the British Empire, but these were protectorates that were given protection in terms of defense and external trade. But these were governed from India, and thus had the Indian rupee as their currency for the longest time. Which is why, if you see, Aden comes into prominence here since the 50s. Aden was what Dubai is in terms of importance, what Dubai is today. Aden used to be the Dubai of the 50s, in fact, where you see a large influx of Indian merchants, whether Gujarati or Sindhi or others, who had gone there because of after oil was discovered. And Aden, given how strategically it is situated on the Red Sea trade, especially after the opening of the Suez Canal, I think. I think it's something that we don't talk about today, but we have a very long history with GCC, especially Oman and the UAE. Now, the UAE being UAE and Dubai being Dubai, Dubai has always thought one step ahead of the rest of the country, as well as the rest of the GCC. Whether it be giving land for the first Hindu temple in 1958, in fact, the Srinathji temple, the Krishna temple in Bardubai is the oldest temple in the GCC as such. Now, with many more coming up, you see gurdwaras coming up. You see Abu Dhabi has now the Swaminarayan temple. So you see that the UAE has an understanding of India. It was limited in the past because for various other reasons, but I think now, when now you see that proactivity, now UAE, like the rest of the GCC, but I think it's always has a step ahead, is looking at itself as more modern and cosmopolitan, and detaching itself from some of the other perceptions that existed on it in the past. And I think that's a very welcome change. I think they want to be looked upon as modern. They want to be looked upon as tolerant. They want to be looked upon inclusive societies, and I think they're making this step in the right direction. And Indians are rightly the largest population. I mean, Indians as such are about 30% of the UAE population, with an impact on business, on real estate, on company formation. Most of the free zones, I have worked with one, have India as as the largest company incorporator, and these are companies that are legit looking at international expansion. And for them, for any Indian company looking at expanding into the international market, I think Dubai is the first step towards internationalization. So I would say is for Indian companies, Dubai is their gateway now to international expansion for reasons which are not only but not only limited to, but it is also because of the governance, the economic governance landscape in India can be complicated, can have its own set of complications, where in Dubai or in the UAE, banking as well as doing business regulations are much more easy and less stifling. I have to say that this is not a criticism of India. India has its own complexities and India has its own strengths, but this is just the big difference with India, that it just makes it so much more interesting, and the exposure to international companies which they might not always get being based out of India, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you talked a lot about business, trade, economics, but there's another thing also, which is now uh, growing, is cricket and entertainment. Now, cricket, we've
Yes.
seen, like, especially post-COVID, the 2020 World Cup, IPL, IPL's happening there, Asia Cups and the Champions Trophy. That's it's becoming a major sports hub. And the last time I was there a few weeks ago, I saw a lot of banners of Indian artists and Bollywood singers doing concerts in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. So I think this relationship is truly comprehensive. Like you said, it's not just comprehensive economic partnership on paper, but it's actually truly comprehensive, right?
No,
Uh,
it's comprehensive, and it's to the extent that it's as you rightly quoted. It's not just limited to trade. It's just about everything, and
yes.
which is what comes gets me back to my point. Dubai is India's finest city, but see, yes, you have all the Indian diaspora is about 3.5 million. That's 35 lakh Indian people who still stick onto their passports and who are all Indian citizens living here. Living in Dubai, they all live in Dubai for different various reasons, in fact. But I think you no longer miss India when you live in Dubai. You have artists not just from across the world, a lot of them from India. You have sorts of musical concerts. You have all performances that happen here. I mean, you don't and given, of course, the connectivity between India and the UAE. I mean, I remember a statistic post COVID. I don't know how much that is true now, but I think it would probably have caught up. The number of India and UAE are the two countries with the most amount of flights between each other.
Hmm.
1,200 flights a week.
Oh, that's massive. Yeah, I mean,
That's that's a lot,
massive.
and I think and I think it went down a little bit after COVID. But I think, I mean, I need to praise myself on the new statistics, but I think it would have probably caught up. The amount of exchange, the amount of things happening between the two countries is incredible. I don't think either India has had that kind of momentum with any other country, nor has the UAE ever witnessed something like this with any other country. I think what we're seeing is an incredibly new age. Um, and we're still not at the peak. To answer your question, we're still not at the peak. I think this is the beginning of the upward curve, and I think there are a lot more things that will happen in the future. There are a lot more surprises, good surprises to come in, especially on the business, economic, and partnership front.
Now, so you talked a lot about, how the India UAE partnership is limitless, right? And, how Dubai has played a very central role historically and, current and going forward. Now, but lately I have been saying that Abu Dhabi, I mean, the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, is also building great relationships with India. Now, do you want to talk a little bit on that? And also, sometimes a lot of Indians think that Dubai is UAE, but then they forget that there's other Emirates also, like RAK, Ajman, Sharjah. So starting with Abu Dhabi and then the other Emirates, would you like to touch upon that and how they are also growing with India?
No, sure. I mean, and that's something we should be talking about more. Dubai is, of course, is the face of the UAE, and in fact, ironically, when I worked with the Ras Al Khaimah Free Zone, we had a tough time explaining to people that where Ras Al Khaimah was placed, because nobody would know about it. I mean, the only reference points, oh, it's 120 kilometers north of Dubai. That's how people understood. And a lot of people in India think that the name of the country is Dubai. They're not wrong in that way, because it's the branding that has gone really well. Now, when we talk of Abu Dhabi is the country's largest emirate. The ruler of the ruler of Abu Dhabi is the president of the country, and historically, Abu Dhabi and Dubai were the ones who together forged the idea of a single country in 1971. In fact, when the British were leaving, in fact. So I think Abu Dhabi has played a very leading role in the formation of the country along with Dubai, and of course it has the oil reserves. Abu Dhabi, apart from being 80% of the landmass of the UAE, also has about 80% of the oil. So all the financing of the infrastructure, the money that flows into the rest of the country, is to an extent financed by Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi, as such, is not Dubai. It has a different vibe altogether. It's again, from a very modern terminology, it's slightly more laid back, which I don't think so. It has its own pace and its own vibe. It has been on the business front. It has done a lot of catching up with Dubai. In fact, where you have Yas Island in Abu Dhabi, which is technically a little away from Abu Dhabi city, more towards Dubai, but the Yas Island has been majorly developed into a huge tourist zone. You have Warner Brothers, you have Ferrari World, and you have Sea World now. You have various other theme parks. You have the F1 track. You have Etihad Arena, where all the concerts happen. So it has strategically placed Yas, and of course the airport itself is located on Yas Island. So it has strategically marketed and developed Yas Island as into one of its biggest success stories that even today now even rivals that of Dubai, right, in terms of tourism. It has Ranveer Singh is the brand ambassador for Yas Island, and I think it has done a really good job for attracting tourists from India. To the extent that I was surprised when I first went to stay at one of the hotels on Yas Island, that even I think it was called the Viceroy, the W Hotel at that time. All hotels in Abu Dhabi serve khandvi and dokla as part of the breakfast,
Right.
because it's just the number of tourists. It's just catering to the number of tourists. But this is to give you an idea how sensitive and how open they are. Something of this sort would never happen in Europe, but I'm acknowledging the fact that in the UAE things are more thought out for Indians. In terms of business, yes, again, the Guggenheim Museum is almost on the verge of completion. You have the Sorbonne Abu Dhabi, New York University Abu Dhabi. You have the Louvre Museum in a very different modernist shape and look, in fact, in Abu Dhabi, and it's the first time. Uh, it's the first and the only time that Louvre has actually had a location outside France. So that is it is a big thing. And then it's Abu Dhabi has been trying to place itself on the cultural and education map of the GCC, portraying itself. And there is competition, very sane and healthy competition between the Emirates, where Dubai has always known to be the fast-paced commercial city, whereas Abu Dhabi wants itself to be looked upon as more elegant, more education focused, more intellectual, and also entertainment to an extent. So I think Abu Dhabi has done a brilliant job. From India, you have IIT Delhi that has opened up in Abu Dhabi. We're looking at various other Indian institutions that are thinking of also opening up in the Emirate. And in terms of other trade, I mean, Abu Dhabi's been we're trying very hard to compete on the port front. The port Khalifa port coming up as a major competition, again in a good way, to Jabal Ali, in fact, which still dominates the entire the transit trade and imports and exports of the UAE. So I think Abu Dhabi, to a great extent, has done a good job out of it in competition with Dubai. And I think it has created its own niche. I don't think and I'm happy that it's not replicating Dubai. You don't need to be the same thing second time. You can just carve out your own identity and your own niche. And I think Abu Dhabi has done excellent job on that. Right?
No, yeah, rightly said, right. And you talked about museums and showcasing culture heritage. Recently, I saw that on Eid al Etihad they also inaugurated the Zayed National Museum, which is pretty famous now. And even Etihad Airlines, right, has created a nice brand for itself. Obviously, I'm sure Emirates still,
I mean, it still dominates the
yeah.
UAE's landscape. There's no doubt to that. But I think it's giving fair competition. Etihad is giving fair competition to Emirates.
So is aviation and aerospace also part of Abu Dhabi's growth strategy?
See, aviation as such, see, between the Emirates, I think there is an unsaid, they have unsaid divisions in terms of who takes care of what and what clusters, what business clusters are to be located where. So Abu Dhabi takes care of the entire defense part of it, where I think the aviation is, and space to a certain extent is Dubai's domain. So when you talk about defense, yes, you have the Tabasun cluster where all companies that intend to set up a defense presence in the UAE have to do it with Tabasun. With us the government of Dubai, sorry, the government of Abu Dhabi. So Abu Dhabi is clearly leading on the defense part of it. Yes, they have excellent new age companies that have the edge. Of course, is the massive conglomerate that they have created, which is again Abu Dhabi based. As are the research organizations in called the TII Venture One. All these companies together form what is the Abu Dhabi Defense and Aerospace Cluster as such. Dubai is more on the aviation side of it. Dubai places itself more on the MRO side in terms of the entire aviation presence in the UAE. So both have managed to balance it out, and I think these are sectors that are bound to grow. I mean, in India we hear of Air India and Boeing and Indigo placing massive plane orders, but I think in the Middle East it is Dubai that's placing, Emirates specifically, that's placing the largest number of aircraft orders. It might be smaller in comparison to what India does, but of course, I mean, given the size and proportion of the market and of the country is concerned, I think it's a very big thing, in fact. And today I think these are efforts that they made 20 30 years ago, and now you see the fruits of it when you see a company like Edge, when you see companies like Calidus Aerospace or other such companies. You see the amount of hard work that has gone into creating an identity for itself in these markets. Saudi Arabia is a big buyer, but it's not technically not an innovator as of now.
Hmm.
Oman is a big buyer, it's not an innovator as of now. But UAE has clearly learned, and especially Abu Dhabi being the defense, having the defense sector to themselves, I think they've done an excellent job of creating that momentum, doing a lot of research, innovation, even if that implies, taking over existing companies. A lot of people might criticize, oh, they're not building their own thing, they're just taking over companies. That's not true. They're taking over companies, putting in their money, taking the time to research and do a lot of R&D, and then coming out with their own unique product portfolios. So yeah. So I think the aviation as well as the defense sectors in the UAE are bound to grow, and they lead the region. I think they're going to lead the region for a very very long time in terms of defense procurement, in terms of aviation, in terms of even MRO. And with the new airport coming up in Dubai, I mean, the Al Maktoum airport is still only for cargo, but now they've announced in 2024 that in the next 10 years they'd complete the new airport, which will again, like everything in Dubai, will be the biggest in the world, with like 100 entrances and like so many runways. Um, the big announcements apart, but like even Emirates, for example, I had during Dubai Air Show, I had gone over for a meeting with Emirates Engineering, and they are coming up with one of the world's largest facility, whether it is shifting their own offices to by 2033 to the Al Maktoum airport, as well as the entire MRO facilities, and they're very clear. And that is where I think our Prime Minister Narendra Modi has inspired these countries is make it their own countries. So Emirates is very is very, what the in their own terminology they would call it, is taking control of their own destiny, in terms of, whether it is defense equipment, defense suppliers, the manufacturers, the companies who provide them components. I think they want to take control and do it their way, and do it in the UAE. So I think that's going to be the next big momentum in the UAE market, is do it on your own, do it locally, and do it in the UN. And that is a very clear inspiration from the Make in India project that we've been hearing of and seeing implemented in the past decade.
Oh yeah, that's fascinating, right? Taking inspiration from our Prime Minister. You talked about ports a little bit. Now, UAE has another port also, right? Which is another emirate,
Mm-hmm.
which could be pretty strategic. Like if you look at the map, right? Fujairah. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
now, why is that not talked about too much? It doesn't get much headlines. And also Ras Al Khaimah, right? That's another emirate that's growing. And then you see, I think they're building a casino there, or it's becoming like a premium holiday spot as well. Especially people from Dubai, if they want like a laid back vacation, seem to be choosing that. So any thoughts on these two Emirates, especially Fujairah? Like if you look at the map, it's a pretty strategic location in the whole of the country, right?
Yes, so both Fujairah and Ras Al Khaimah, after, I would say, after Abu Dhabi and Dubai, are the two Emirates with the most potential, and especially Ras Al Khaimah. I mean, not just because I've worked with the free zone of Ras Al Khaimah before, but it's being there and having seen what they're doing. So to start with your question on Fujairah, now Fujairah is, in a very geopolitical way, in a very geopolitical terminology, does not have the same challenges that, say, they are on this side of the Strait of Hormuz compared to being that side. It is for India. It's the closest port into towards India. It has a very strategic location that is reused mainly for their oil, for oil supplies. So if you go to Fujairah, which when driving around, when you enter Fujairah, the first thing you see is all the oil refineries in one row along the coast. In fact, so that, I think, is Fujairah's biggest USP for the UAE, that it offers them a direct connectivity out of the Persian Gulf, straight out into the rest of the world, with no other geopolitical entity or event that could actually block those. In fact, we've seen in the past events where this thing can happen for the other Emirates. But again, Dubai being Dubai, I think, and in terms of, there are a lot of things unsaid in terms of who does what. And I think in the scheme of things, it has been decided and it has been largely implemented, is that Jabal Ali was the first big free zone. It's the first big port, and I think there is consensus among the leadership of the country, that it would continue to be the main port as such, that would take in the customs revenue, that would take in all the ships coming in. Because even while I was with Ras Al Khaimah, we used to try and promote Sakar Port, which is one of the bigger ports, which is the biggest port in Ras Al Khaimah, to have direct lines to India, but it didn't make it feasible. And I think shipping companies, there is a preference for the kind of infrastructure and the environment that Jabal Ali offers. So, in terms of ports, I think the Jabal Ali Free Zone, JAVS as they call it, Jabal Ali Free Zone Authority, largely dominates the country's landscape on everything related to shipping and the imports and exports, all of which comes. It has a very entrenched ecosystem that it has built, and it'll take any other port quite a while to replicate that kind of effort that has gone into making this. Though, of course, I mean, coming into Jabal Ali, the other ports are not very far. They're less than a day away for supplies. So even we had a lot of shipping companies that offered, once you're cleared at Jabal Ali, they ship it for free to the other ports, including Sakar Port or the Khalifa Port, wherever. But beyond ports, when you talk of development, I think the next big thing is Ras Al Khaimah. Ras Al Khaimah has a Marjan Island, which was built quite a while ago, and it is only now that hotels are coming up on it. Now that it's being marketed as a very premium holiday destination, like I mean, it's I was surprised when I found out that, like Hilton has 4 properties in Ras Al Khaimah, in a place like Ras Al Khaimah, which, I mean, coming from a Dubai point of view, you look at it, oh, it's out there, it's so remote as such, but it has always been admired for its calm, for its silence, for the slow luxury vacation that it offers you. So I think, and even, I mean, again, the RAK airport has direct flights to India. You have
Mm.
Indigo that flies in directly to Ras Al Khaimah from Mumbai, as well as Air India, I think, or in Air India Express, one of
I
the two.
think Hyderabad too. I think so.
I guess, and it's partly not just tourism; it's also the labor inflow, because a lot of the labor here is from the subcontinent, especially India. But that being said, Ras Al Khaimah, Marjan Island has like some of the biggest hotels. They have a massive double tree by Hilton property. They have Movenpick. They have Hampton by Hilton, and several other hotel properties that are coming up. And of course, the Wynn Casino from Las Vegas. So I think, and this is again in the spirit of fair competition between the Emirates. So Ras Al Khaimah announced that it was giving out permits to to manufacture alcohol, which is again a big thing in this part of the world. In the GCC, it has never been done. So that was a one step forward that it took. There are breweries under construction that have been constructed that do third party manufacturing. So you'd probably soon see beers and other alcohol made in the UAE as such. Apart from that, the Wynn Casino is the next big thing. It's coming up on Marjan Island. Marjan Island is what Palm is to Dubai. It's the fanciest part of and the most luxurious part of Ras Al Khaimah, and which is where tourism is increasingly concentrated as such. Very close to the Marjan Island, they've announced a whole new business district, DIFC style. And the airport is being upgraded. So I think with all these three combination, I think you'll see an emirate that's going to give now some amount of competition to Abu Dhabi and to Dubai, in fact. Well, Fujairah still remains very tourism focused. It's still very sparsely populated. So apart from being the transit point for petroleum and petroleum products, for now there is nothing that indicates that Fujairah is going to boom. Of course, I'm sure there will be a spillover thing. Companies, people who want to set up in Ras Al Khaimah maybe want to do it in Fujairah. Fujairah is excellent for its undersea tourism. In fact, you do a lot of snorkeling. You do a lot of. They have a lot of lovely beaches. So I think the tourism potential is still there. But on other economic parameters, I think Ras Al Khaimah it is after Abu Dhabi and Dubai.
No, that's great to hear, and it's great to see all seven Emirates playing such a positive role, right, in the growth of the country. We talked about UAE, Oman, but then as a broader GCC, now each country is on its own trying to grow and transform. Everybody has their own vision 2030, for example. I think Kuwait has a 2035, I think. So all of these, how do you see this region like growing in the next 10 to 15 years? Because some people say, it could be the next Europe in the next 10, 15 years. And how do you see like India and this region developing their trade, right, over
Hmm.
it's already a lot, but as I'm talking not just UAE and Oman, but as a whole, like the other four countries too, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia.
So, see, I don't foresee it being a Europe. I mean, yes, in terms of development, in terms of economic development, it'll probably go well past Europe. In fact, Europe has a different ball game to play on that, but and has its own set of challenges. But when you're talking about GCC, I think, see, Saudi is of course the big brother in the region. It is the largest population. It is
Mhm.
32 million. The expat population is much smaller because they have a larger local population to cater to, unlike the UAE, which is only 1 million. So they need the more expat populations to give that economic momentum. But Saudi is very clearly, Saudi Arabia is clearly the next big thing in this, and it'll last for a long time. In fact, Saudi currently is I would say, from my very little experience of having been in Riyadh, I have not been to the rest of the country, but from what I hear and from what I see, Saudi is, in terms of business, is about 20 years 20 years behind Dubai. It was what Dubai was 20 years ago, but I think it's going to catch up very, very, very soon. You go to Riyadh, and in all fairness, Dubai has two metro lines. The you know since to the first one inaugurated in 2009, and of course there's a blue line being inaugurated, and a third one. I think the push on infrastructure that Saudi has had is unparalleled. Like when I in November 2024, they announced the opening of 6 driverless metro lines straight away.
Hmm.
I spent a couple of days in Riyadh, and I specifically went to see how the metro functions. It is absolutely world class. Even Dubai, which I thought was at the top of it all, Saudi outclasses Dubai in many ways in terms of the modern infrastructure it's creating. In terms of opening up to businesses, there have been certain projects that have been announced, and they've probably fallen off the radar. But on a larger context, Saudi will be catching up. Of course, there are initiatives where they have announced that they want all foreign companies that want to do business with the Saudi government would have to open up in Riyadh, as their regional GCC headquarters in Riyadh, as a direct competition to Dubai. But I think we you have massive entertainment, you have massive other free zones. In fact, they've announced 4 free zones in Saudi. It's taken a little bit more time than expected, but I think it's a boom that we're going to see from here to 2030. You have the World Cup, you have FIFA coming up, you have the World Expo Riyadh in 2030, I think, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So you have several big announcement, big ticket projects that could leverage Saudi into the next stage of development. How long this will take is, again, sometimes it seems that it's very quick. Sometimes you feel, oh, okay, this is all PR announcement. But somewhere in between, I think that you from now to about in the next 10 years, from now to 2035, you'd see a massive sea change in Saudi Arabia in terms of the kind of changes that'll come in, and it's opening up to the world. I think, see, for India, I think before India started importing Russian oil in a big way, Saudi Arabia was its biggest oil seller. Saudi Arabia and UAE now in the BRICS clan. So I think there is a lot of work that India and Saudi will be doing, and I think the UAE is the easiest model to replicate. Everything that India is doing with the UAE can easily be done and replicated, even to a greater volume and scale in Saudi Arabia. It's so much more of a larger country. It is a country that has 14 airports, and in the aviation sector, there's a boom. They're opening up to tourism in a very, very big way. So yes, it. If I have to follow uniquely the PR, I think it'll catch up in the next 10 years. But on a very realistic note, I think in next 15 years, 20 years max, you'll see Saudi Arabia in a very, very different way, in fact.
Yeah, no, rightly said, right? And I think even India and Saudi Arabia have a pretty strong relationship, right? Which could help further grow that, right? Yeah. Um, Another country that people are talking about, not in the GCC world, but slightly far away, is Morocco, right?
Mhm.
And it's been making some headlines recently, for aerospace defense especially, and even other sectors. Like, what is your perception or thoughts about Morocco as a business center, right? Not just aerospace defense, but in general. And again, like I always go by strategic locations and maps, and again, that is again a very important location, right? So, how do you see that evolving?
Sure, and that's a good question. Morocco. I mean, when you see all of North Africa, in fact, I mean the term MENA is used Middle East and North Africa, and I think in terms of development in Africa and in terms of development in North Africa, I think Morocco is by far the country that outclasses most of all competition. An excellent reputation among the Arab world, among especially the King of Morocco, who is not just a political leader of the country but also spiritual leader, because the Alawi dynasty of the Moroccan royalty claims direct descendants from the Prophet. So there is so much prestige and there's so much respect given to the monarch as such across the Arab world, in fact. So that is one thing that Morocco has an edge on. Morocco, if you compare in terms of on the very modern scale, the scale of modernity, having been a French colony in the past, the outlook is much more modern. I mean, they speak French, and they also now very largely have seen the transformation. I was there in Morocco in 2024, where I'd taken all the defense companies from Abu Dhabi that I mentioned, had actually taken them to Morocco for the Marrakesh Air Show. So it was a country, from a very, very Indian perspective, it's a brilliant country. They adore Indians. I think they still do. They've lived on Hindi movies most of their lives. I had this very funny, but I mean, it was a very heartwarming moment where one of my travel coordinators in Marrakesh, her name was Jamuna, and she was clearly Moroccan. So I asked her, like, where does his name come from? And she's like, oh, my mother was a fan of has always been a fan of Hindi movies, and she watched it in 1961 Dilip Kumar Ganga Jamuna. So she named my cousin, who's a guy, Ganga, and she named me Jamuna, in fact. So that's just an example of how Indians are perceived in a very different light from what you'd compare to the West. We've already discussed in the past what kind of perceptions, and in today's world, especially in a Trump world, I mean, it's just going berserk. But North Africa, and especially the North African Arab world, perceives India in a very, very different light. They look upon us as intelligent. They look upon as India as the IT guys, the brainy guys, the mathematicians, and generally have a very, very favorable attitude towards India. And in terms of Morocco, I was, having taken a lot of companies from the GCC and from the Middle East, the one thing I was disappointed is that there are hardly any Indian companies. Morocco has a very strategic location. It is literally Spain's neighbor. I mean, it's across the Strait of Gibraltar. It's just about 14 kilometers from Spain. It has an excellent business relations and economic relations with Spain, France, and the US, of course. And I think its location, I mean, it has its geopolitical problems too, with Western Sahara as well as Algeria, which has closed its entire land border to Morocco and doesn't allow Moroccan airlines to fly over it. But otherwise, I think it's a country that has a lot of potential for Indian companies in terms of dealing. It currently deals with a lot of French and US companies as such. From the last statistic I had, they spend about $250 billion on their defense. It is a market that is bound to grow. For a lot of companies, whether Indian or otherwise, it is the closest outsourcing location to Europe, where they can use Morocco as a manufacturing base and still be right in the heart of Europe in an hour or two, less than 2 hour flight. In fact, you can fly to Madrid in 45 minutes. You can fly to Paris in an hour. So I think Morocco's proximity to Western Europe is what gives it a very strategic edge. So I would have looked upon it. I would have thought that a lot of Indian companies that would look at targeting and expanding to Europe should actually be looking at Morocco as a base. As a country, it is, again, as I said, I identifies like India, where the cities are developed. They're all they have a very modern outlook. I'm not just talking because they speak English or French, but it's just the way they are. They have a very modern outlook. They are religious, but at the same time very practical and and outward looking. So I think it's, in terms of ethos, in terms of the culture, in terms of the work culture, I think Morocco is a very good fit in terms of for Indian companies. In Africa, it is, of course, it is the largest, apart from Algeria and probably Nigeria. It's one of the largest defense markets, defense and aerospace markets. I mean, they are, again, they only work mainly with French and American companies, and I think maybe India could be a good option given our goodwill in the country and given the increasing goodwill that Indian companies have across the world. One of the good things that came out, for example, from the 2024 Marrakesh Air Show, where we took even Tata Advanced Systems Limited, and they had a specific tank that they were looking at, that they had developed and were looking at marketing. And 6 months later, we hear the good news that TASL is actually going to set up a manufacturing unit. You have Airworks from India, from Bangalore, that is also opened up in terms of aviation services. But there's a lot more to be done. And I think if there are any Indian companies that here listening to this, I would say, if you're looking at Europe, or if you're looking even at the African market, in fact, I think Morocco is the most stable, the most safe bet in terms of doing business and reaching out to your larger markets.
No, that's fascinating to hear, right? And I think on the Tata subject,
Hmm.
the news that you're referring to, I think they also manufactured that first tank, but I would have to
No,
cross.
so they manufacture it. It's their own product, but they have opened a specific plant in Morocco to cater to the African market. Because when you're talking about Morocco, it was not just exhibiting and talking to Moroccan companies or the Moroccan government. When you're in Morocco, you're talking to the entire North African and West African market. So you name it, you'll have Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Nigeria, and the various other countries. Morocco works very closely with countries in the Sahel, especially Niger and I think Burkina Faso. They have extremely close business relationships. So when you target Morocco, it's, apart from, of course, the Western Europe market, you're also looking at the Northern and Western African market. So it's a very large market to cater to. In fact, I wasn't there on it, but we also had at Advanced Business Events, where we organize also rail events. I think it was a big success, where you see delegations, where you see companies from all across the region that come in to participate on most of the business events. GITEX, the Dubai GITEX now happens in
Hmm.
Morocco, because it's just the most vibrant business country in that part of the world.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. As you speak, I'm actually thinking maybe Morocco could also contribute to the IMEC project, right? The India, Middle East, Europe corridor. Morocco could play its own role in that, right? Although it might
No,
not
it could
come
be
on
an
a direct
extension.
path, but it could
Could be an
be a supporting role.
extension. See,
Yeah,
the IMEC, as it goes through the Oman, UAE, through Saudi Arabia and Jordan and
Israel.
Israel,
Mhm.
and then from Israel it's shipped out again towards Italy and France, and there's another branch that could just branch out and go up to Morocco. So
Yes.
that's not unimaginable, and I would be happy to see if there is thought on that. I mean, you have countries like Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, that are very India friendly, that would love to see more business with India, and this could be probably one of the easiest ways to do it.
Yeah, yeah. No, fascinating times ahead, right? And I'm uh, really excited for India's economic growth and UAE's economic growth, the GCC as a region. Uh, you know, we are coming to the end of the podcast. But I'd love to thank you for your time and fascinating insights. Not just on UAE, but Oman, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and you not just shared, technical aspects, but also your own personal stories. So thank you for your time, Pranav.
Thank you, Krishna. It was lovely sharing my thoughts on this, and and yeah, I'm sure that 2026 will be a great year for many more such partnerships, many more such larger partnerships.
Yeah, yeah. On that note, thank you so much.
Thank you, Krishna.